as an introduction to this week, just to know what we're going to be learning about, there's a custom that every week, it's a decree from the rabbis, that every week the Jewish nations read the Torah. And by the way, the reason why we read the Torah has got nothing to do with God. It has to do with the rabbis. Moshe Rabbeinu came and he instituted the reading of the Torah. So usually what Moshe Rabbeinu instituted, we think it's Torah rule. But over here, Moshe Rabbeinu did not say it's a Torah rule. He specifically said, God never told it to me. But I think it's a good idea if we read the Torah every week. Okay? Years later, when the Romans made decrees in the land of Israel that we may not learn Torah, the Jewish people started, since we were not allowed to read the Torah, we were allowed to read the prophets and the writings. That we were allowed to read. The Romans didn't mind if we read that. So instead of reading the Torah, we instituted an haftarah. We read every week a haftarah that has to do with the concept of the Torah reading. That's what we read. So after the Romans went away, we did not take away the haftarah. We kept it there. Since we took it upon ourselves, so today we read both the Torah reading and we read in the haftarah. That's what we read today. And usually, if you notice, the Torah reading and the haftarah are similar issues. Similar issues, except sometimes it happens like twice a year, 3 times a year, and sometimes it can happen and it doesn't fall in 5 years. This week is going to be a strange haftarah. It's going to be a haftarah that has nothing to do with the Parsha. It doesn't happen very often. It only happens Erev Rosh Chodesh. When it's the day before the new moon. When it's a day before the new moon, we read a special haftarah. It's called Machar Chodesh. So this is a little bit what we're going to discuss today. So let's start. Page 3. ישנו עניין מיוחד בערב ראש חודש שחל בשבת. There's something special about the day before Rosh Chodesh that happens to be on Shabbat, שבו מפטירים מחר חודש. That in this week we're going to make a special haftarah that has nothing to do with the parsha. It's a haftarah, ערב ראש חודש, מחר חודש. ויש לבאר השייכות של הפטרה זו לערב ראש חודש. So we have to explain, what does this haftarah have to do with ערב ראש חודש, with the day before Rosh Chodesh? It looks like there's no connection except the fact that it starts מחר חודש. Yeah, but we're going to see that's not a main issue of the haftarah. So let's continue. ובהקדמה, as an introduction, שבדרך כלל שייכת ההפטרה לקריאת התורה. Usually the haftarah has the same topic as the reading of the Torah. שהיא מעניין הפרשה. That it's the same thing of the parasha. ובפרט שטעם קריאת ההפטרה הוא בגלל שזמן הגזירה שלא יקראו בתורה. Specifically because the reason why they instituted the haftarah is because we were not allowed, because of the decrees, to read the Torah itself. קראו בנביאים עניין הפרשה. The custom was that they read in the prophets the same topic that the parasha is read. ומנהג זה נשאר גם לאחר שבטלה הגזרה. And this custom we keep even after the decree is removed. ואילו בערב ראש חודש שחל בשבת, but on ערב ראש חודש that happened to be on Shabbat, דוחים את ההפטרה שמנה הפרשה. We're not going to read the haftarah that has something to do with the parsha. ומפטירים מחר חודש. We're going to have a whole haftarah, it's called מחר חודש. By the way, I don't think it happened in the last 5-6 years. So it's something, but sometimes it can happen 2 or 3 times a year also. So it depends on it has to be Erev Rosh Chodesh that happens to be on Shabbat. But it doesn't happen a lot. Okay. Source number 1. והנה כתוב מהי סיבת ההפטרה. It says, I'm going to write, what's the reason that we read haftarah at all? כפי שמצאתי כתוב, it says, this is from Rabbi Eliyahu ben Asher, Ashkenazi. He says, I saw it's written down, שאנטיוכוס הרשע, מלך יוון, that Antiochus the Even, sorry, I said the Romans, it was the Greeks, the king of the Greeks, גזר על ישראל שלא יקראו בתורה ברבים. He made a decree on the Jewish people that they should not read the Torah in public. מה עשו ישראל? What did the Jewish people do? לקחו פרשה אחת מנביאים שעניינה דומה לעניין מה שכתוב בפרשה של השבת ההיא. So we took a portion from the prophets that is similar to the Shabbos, ועתה אף שבטלה הגזרה, and now even though the decree is no longer in place, המנהג הזה אינו בטל. We still keep that custom. ועד היום קוראים אותם הפרשיות של נביאים אחר קריאת התורה. And until today we read these portions after the reading of the Torah. ונקראת הפטרה, we call this הפטרה, לשון הפסקה. הפטרה means to pause. ראש חודש שחל להיות באחד בשבת, ראש חודש that happened to be on the first of Shabbat, מפטירים בשבת שלפניו, we do a הפטרה before it, ויאמר לו יהונתן מחר חודש. It starts in the book of Shemuel, and we read, and it says to him, Yonatan, tomorrow, מחר חודש. Let's just explain a little bit what is the Haftarah about, even though we're not going to be discussing it so much, but just that we know a little bit what's the Haftarah about. We all know that the first king that we had was King Shaul, King Saul. He's the first king. And by the way, King Saul was only king for 2 years. There's a lot, but reading about it, he was only king for 2 years. And after that, King David followed. God chose King David over King Saul. And the Torah is all the time has a big fight between, you will notice, between King Saul and King David. Now, this is something that we have to be very, very, very careful as we're going to be reading now. Many times we read the Torah, we read it like small children. And, we are used to make things easy for us because it makes sense in our minds. So we say King Saul wasn't a nice guy and King David was a nice guy. Yeah, that's what we say. We have to remember what we're talking about, completely righteous people over here. King Saul was completely righteous. King David was completely righteous. So we have to understand a little bit more what's going on between King Saul and King David. But nevertheless, the thing was that King David went out to battle. He killed Goliath. Everybody knows the famous story with King David and Goliath. And he came back and the women were dancing and were singing that King Saul killed thousands and David killed tens of thousands. So King Saul already saw the future. He thought that his son Yehonatan is going to be king after him. But he already noticed that no, it's not going to be Yehonatan. There's another guy that it looks like he's going to go against. It looks like he's going to go against the king. So he was adamant to make sure to kill King David. He tried to kill King David. Now, when King David told Yehonatan used to invite him over to eat with his father all the time. Yehonatan was King Saul's son. So when Yehonatan invited King David, he says, your father wants to kill me. I'm afraid to come over. So he says, why are you saying this? I didn't see. My father usually tells me everything, and he didn't tell me that he's trying to kill you. So King David told him, look, let's make an experiment. Tomorrow is going to be a celebration. We're going to have a big meal because the next day it's going to be Rosh Chodesh. The next day is going to be Rosh Chodesh. I'm not going to appear, and when King David will see that I'm not there, he's going to say something. And by the way he's talking about me, you will notice if he wants to kill me or he doesn't want to kill me. So, King Saul, very good. So the first night, this is what happened. So first night, there was all the chairs, and King David's chairs was empty. So everybody noticed it, that King David's chair is empty, he's not there. But King Saul didn't say anything. Why? Because it says he made a calculation, probably he became impure, and he cannot come and eat with the sacrifices that everybody else is eating, so that's why he didn't want to come. But when it's 2 days in a row, it says, why, he didn't go to the mikveh? 2 days in a row, so on the second day, he says, where's King David? He asks his son, where's King David? So he says, King David went to his father. He wanted to eat with Ishai and his brothers with his father. So King Saul says, he deserves the death penalty. So then Yonatan knew. That's what the Haftarah is talking about. We're not going to concentrate on that so much, just that we know what's happening. So let's look at source number 3. This is what the Haftarah says, Vayomer lo Yonatan machar chonesh v'nifkati ki yipaked moshavecha. And this is what Yonatan says, tomorrow is going to be a new month, v'nifkadeta, it says they're going to notice you. How they're going to notice you? By the fact that you're not there. By the fact that there's an empty seat. They will ask, where is the King David? And then I will see my father's response, and I will tell you he wants to kill you or not. So the Rebbe asks a question. V'lich'ura eino muvan. Now, this is difficult to understand. Why? עניינו של ערב ראש חודש נזכר רק בהתחלת ההפטרה. If you want to talk about Rosh Chodesh, the Haftarah should be about Rosh Chodesh. But the Haftarah doesn't talk about Rosh Chodesh at all. The Haftarah has got the story that I just told you, that's the Haftarah. In other words, it has nothing to do with Rosh Chodesh. It could have happened Pesach. It could have happened Shabbat. It could have happened any other day. The fact that it happened Rosh Chodesh has got nothing to do with the story.
But it's this meal that they invite King David was Rosh Chodesh meal?
Yeah, exactly. But it didn't have to be. That's the only connection. Yeah, it could have been Shabbat, it could have been Rosh Chodesh, it could have been a wedding, it could have been anything. There's no connection. It says, just because it happened to be Rosh Chodesh, that's the whole story. There must be some other connections. ויאמר לו יונתן מחר חודש, and he says to him, Yonatan, tomorrow is a new moon, ואילו כל עיקר סיפור הדברים שבהמשך ההפטרה, all the story that I just told you, that in the continuation of the ההפטרה, שיש בה מספר פסוקים גדול יותר מכפי המוכח, it's a long story, I said it very shortly, אינו קשור לכאורה לראש חודש. What has got that to do with ראש חודש? It's got nothing to do with ראש חודש, with the new moon. שהרי סיפור זה לא היה מוכרח להיות בראש חודש, this story didn't need to be on the first of the month, אלא היה יכול להיות גם בכל זמן שבו נערכת זו החגית אצל המלך. It could have been any other time, שבת, holidays. ובה היה נפקד מקומו של דוד, and everybody expected King David to be there. גם צריך להבין, we also need to understand, מה נוגע כל הסיפור של יונתן ודוד אלינו עתה? The sages wanted specifically to tell us the story of Yonatan and David. This story is relating something to us that we need to learn. So the question, what did the sages think it's so important for us to know about this story? What's so important over there? כאשר יונתן ודוד אינם נמצאים. And now, especially, Yonatan and David are not here. So what's the message? What is God? What the sages wanted to teach us by all this story? Page number 6. ויובן בהקדם ביאור עניינם של שאול, אביו של יונתן ודוד. So in order to understand this, we need to understand the root of Shaul and the root of David. Where does Shaul, where does King Saul come from? And then where does King David comes from? So let's see. So in source number 4, this is the book of Shmuel, it says like this. Ben Shana Shaul b'malcho. 1 year Shaul was in his kingdom. Now there's 2 ways to learn it. You can learn it a year old. That's right. But obviously it doesn't mean that. It means it was 1 year into his reign. That's how you translate it. Yeah. Ben Shana Shaul b'malcho. V'shnei shanim malach al Israel. You should know that he was 2 years king over Israel. So it couldn't have been when he was 1 year old, because the story doesn't make sense if he was 1 year old. If he was only king for 2 years, obviously it was 1 year to his reign. So it says, ויבחר לו שאול 3,000 Israel. And Shaul chose for him 3,000 men from amongst the Jews. והיו עם שאול 2,000 במכמש ובהר בית כל, and they were together with Shaul in the mountain of בית כל. ו1,000 היו עם יונתן בגבעת בנימין. And 1,000 was together with Yonatan in the hill of Binyamin. ויתר העם שילח איש לא אהב. And the rest of the nation he sent men to his courts, to his places. ורש"י says, יש לפתור. Rashi explains this. He says, why does it say, ben shana Shaul b'malcho? The literal meaning is he was 1 year old when he was king. He says, why would the Torah say it in such a manner? To confuse us? Yeah, you should say it in the right terms. On the 3rd year of his reign. That's what it should say. But it doesn't say that. It says when he was, it's almost like saying when he was 1 year old when he became king. It doesn't make sense. So it says, Rashi says, Bashana rishona she'umlach ba. This is the first year that he became king. והוא מלך 2 שנים על ישראל. And he was a king 2 years on over Israel. ובשנה ראשונה מיד, ויבחר לו שאול 3,000. And the first year immediately, Shaul separated 3,000 men. That was his confidence. And the Talmud now talks about it. Why does it say it in such a funny manner? Why doesn't it just say, in the first year to his reign? So the Gemara says, נאמר בן שנה שאול במלכו. It says, the Torah specifically tells you, he was 1 year when he was king. ולכאורה דבר זה תמוה. It says, why would you say it in such a way? אמר רב הונא, so Rav Huna is going to tell you, the Torah wants to tell you something. The Torah wants to teach you something. We're going to learn something very deep from here. לומר, to tell you, שבשעה שמלך היה כבן שנה, it says, when he was 1 year old, imagine a 1-year-old boy, what kind of sin did the 1-year-old boy did?
What kind of what?
What kind of sins did the 1-year-old did? Nothing. A 1-year-old doesn't sin. Yeah? A 1-year-old cannot sin. He doesn't have the capacity to sin. He doesn't know between good and evil yet.
Can they juke him from the floor?
He doesn't know between good and evil yet. He cannot sin even if he wants to. He can do whatever he wants, so not called a sin. Yeah? So it says, שמלך היה כבן שנה. It says, why does it want to tell you? It wants to tell you the spiritual level of King Saul. That's what Rav Huna says. What was his spiritual level? His spiritual level was that of a 1-year-old. What does it mean? Just like a 1-year-old never sinned, also King Saul never sinned. He was such a righteous person, completely righteous, 100% righteous. In Lashon of the Tanya, Tzadik Gamur. Yeah, Tzadik Gamur. Tzadik Gamur was complete Tzadik. שלא טעם טעם חטא. He didn't even understand what sin is to that degree. Just like a small boy cannot understand what is a sin, King Saul was such a righteous person, he didn't even have a clue of what sin is. It wasn't in his vocabulary. He didn't even understand it. שהיה כשר וישר לגמרי. He was completely kosher, completely there. And by the way, we know King Saul came from the tribe of Binyamin. The tribe of Binyamin was the only tribe who did not participate in the selling of Yosef. He was without sin. And this was just, King Saul was without sin, just like Binyamin was without sin, and just like his son Yehonatan was without sin. Okay, so let's continue. ומקשה על הסברה הזו רב נחמן בר יצחק. So Rav Huna explained that you know why it says he was 1-year-old? Simple, to tell us what kind of a righteous person is it. Immediately Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak stood up. He says, hey, I can learn something else from you. You saying that he was completely righteous? I'll teach you something which maybe you're not going to like. So it says, what does Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says? אולי נאמר, it says, maybe let's say the opposite. שכוונת הפסוק באמרו כבן שנה, that when the verse tells us he was 1-year-old, שמלוכלך בטיט ובצועה תמיד. It wants to tell us that King Saul was completely dirty with dirtiness, with mud, and his excrement. Like a baby. Okay. He's all the time makes doo-doo on himself. He says, maybe that's what he wants to teach you. Why did you come to the conclusion that it wants to teach you good things about King Saul? Maybe it wants to teach you that he was as dirty as a baby. He was completely full of his own excrement. He was completely full of mud, of dirtiness. Maybe that's what it wants to teach us, just like a 1-year-old. Umeirim. So it says, immediately the Gemara tells us a story. After Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said this explanation, what happened? הראו לו לרב נחמן פחדים בחלומו. For the next couple of weeks, Rav Nachman couldn't sleep. He had nightmares. Every night he had nightmares. He wasn't able to sleep. והבין שהוא עונש על שזלזל בשאול. And he immediately understood this is a punishment because this is not a way to talk about a complete righteous person like King Saul. So how are you talking to King Saul this way? What is this? אמר נעניתי לכם עצמות שאול בן קיש. So it says he asked for forgiveness from the bones of King Saul. כלומר, מבקש אני מחילה מעצמות שאול על שפגעתי בו. I'm asking for forgiveness that I dared to talk against King Saul in this manner. חזר וראה פחדים בחלומו. He didn't help. Continued to saw nightmares every night. רב נחמן בר יצחק cannot sleep now. והבין שלא ביקש סליחה בלשון מחוברת כראוי. And he realized he didn't ask for forgiveness the right way. He should ask it in a better manner. וחזר ואמר, so he asked it again. And why did the second time? נעניתי לכם עצמות שאול בן קיש מלך ישראל. So he says, I've asked forgiveness from Shaul ben Kish, the king of Israel. ואז פסקו ממנו הפחדים בחלומותיו. And then the nightmares stopped. אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל. So then Rav Yehuda, the Gemara continues. The Gemara tells us that Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, מפני מה לא נמשכה מלכות בית שאול לדורות רבים? It says, I want to understand. Why God didn't like King Saul? King Saul he was righteous, like we say. Even somebody talked a little bit bad about him afterwards, you saw what happened to him. So he was a righteous person, a completely righteous person. His son, we know he was a righteous person. Jonathan, completely righteous person. He says, why God took the kingdom away from him and gave to somebody else? And by the way, you can say he made a mistake. He didn't make a mistake. God made him make a mistake. If you read the story of actually what happened over there, you will notice that he was forced into it, whether he liked it or not. When he didn't kill Amalek on the right time. But he had a good intention, and it was, God knew that this is what he was going to do.
The question, was it about Amalek, or was it about that he started to fight with somebody without that Shmuel came and said, why did you start the war? I told you, wait until I bring your Lord.
Whichever way you're going to look at it, it looks like it was almost like the sin in the Garden of Eden. God made it so that he would sin. God was looking for a way. In other words, God didn't want him to be the king. Let's put it this way. God says, you know what? The truth is, this guy is righteous, and I need to manipulate the situation in order to make sure he's going to be king. So God could manipulate the situation, he's not going to be king. Okay. So it says, so over here, Rav Yehuda knows this. So Rav Yehuda says, if Shaul is considered to be someone like Binyamin, and we know Binyamin is somebody who passed away without evil inclination at all. Somebody who's completely righteous. You know, you can't say the same thing about King David. We all know about King David. It says, why did God took it away from King Saul and gave it to King David? What's the idea behind it? So Rav Yehuda now has an answer. Listen to the answer. מפני שלא היה בו שום דופי. The reason why God took it away from him because he was completely righteous. He had no blemishes whatsoever. Completely clean. That's why God took the kingdom away from him. של יוחסין. He says, both in himself and in his lineage. He came from a holy group, from the tribe of Binyamin. שהיה כשר מכל הצדדים. He was kosher from all sides. He had no blemish whatsoever. Not in his lineage, not in his DNA, not in his behavior, not in his intellect, nothing. The guy was perfect. So he says, that's why God took it away. How does that make sense? שאמר רבי יוחנן משום רבי שמעון, and he says, I'll tell you what, there's actually a halacha, he said. Halacha says that such a person cannot be a leader. Let's see. אמר רבי יוחנן משום רבי שמעון בן יהוצדק, he said, Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, the son of יהוצדק, אין מעמידים ממנים פרנס על הציבור. It says, we never nominate a mayor, a governor, a king, anybody that's responsible to the congregation, אלא אם כן קופה של שרצים של פגמי ייחוס תלויה לו מאחוריו. Unless he has some skeletons in the closet, in his lineage. If he has skeletons in his closet, then we nominate him. If he doesn't have skeletons in the closet, we don't nominate him. We want the guy to have a lot of skeletons in the closet. A lot of evil, a lot of bad things in his lineage. Says, how does that make sense? Umadua. So the Gemara says, why? Who would want such a thing? So the Gemara answers, שאם תזוח דעתו עליו ויתגאה לציבור, that one day he's going to say, you know what, I'm taking care of these guys, day in, day and night, day in, day. They don't know how to behave. Like Moses, takes care of the nation, takes care of the nation, takes care of the nation, and they all the time go against him. If it says, if he's going to be, what happened? A person who he comes from a great lineage, that he knows for sure he has no blemish in his lineage, what's going to happen? He's going to think that he's better than everybody else. That's what he's going to think. Automatically, it says whether he likes it or not. It says the reason why I behave the way I behave is because I come from a good lineage. And you know why these guys behave the way they behave? Because their parents sold Yosef. You know, their parents did this. Their parents did the golden calf. Their parents, I'm from the tribe of Levi. My tribe of Levi never happened. You know, we've got a good lineage all the way through. We don't deal with those things. That's what you thought. So it says, we don't want such a person that thinks he's above everybody else. So we want somebody that has some blemish. Why? Omrim lo, it says this way, if a person has skeletons in the closet, he's got something in the background which is not so kosher, we can tell to him, Chazor ve'abet lachorecha. It says, don't judge us so quickly. Go look at your lineage. Me'eze mishpacha ata ba? From which family do you come? ולכן דוד, and this is why God chose King David, שבא ממשפחה שהיה בה פגם ייחוס, he came from a family that was blemished. It had Ruth the Moabite. Yeah, it came from Ruth the Moabite. נמשכה מלכותו, he came from Ruth the Moabite, ולא כן שאול, and Shaul was 100%. So therefore, that's what he says. Yeah, so let's continue. Page 8. ויובן בהקדם ביאור עניינם של שאול, אביו של יונתן ודוד, ולכאורה אינו מובן. So it says, we don't understand something. איך אפשר לומר בנוגע לדוד? It says, I don't understand. The Rebbe says, this is how you treat David, this is how you treat King David, שאם תזוח דעתו עליו, אומרים לו חזור לאחוריך, that if King David is going to become haughty, we're going to say, hey, look at your lineage. לפי שיש בו דופי משפחה, because hey, you come from a convert, שבא מרות המואביה, that he came from Ruth the Moabite. In two things you're not allowed to do that. How? וכי משם שבא מרות המואביה יש דופי בו. First of all, the fact that he came from Ruth, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Ruth has qualities that wasn't found in the Jewish nation. So God wanted these qualities in the Jewish nations. That's not something which is bad. That's first of all. And second of all, the most thing is, הרי יש איסור לומר לבעל תשובה. It says, one is not allowed to say to a בעל תשובה, או לגר, or to a convert, זכור מעשיך הראשונים. You're not allowed to tell him, remember where you come from. Remember yesterday you used to eat this. Remember what happened to your grandfather. Yeah? כך שאסור להזכיר זאת אפילו לרות עצמה. It says, not only you're not allowed to mention it to King David, you're not even allowed to mention it to Ruth. ועל אחת כמה וכמה בנוגע לדוד, and how much more so King David, שרק בא מרות המואביה, he only came from the root, אבל אצלו לא היה עניין בלתי רצוי. So what if he came? He came from the Abraham also converted. Ruth also converted. What's the difference? Okay. Let's look at source number 6. כשם שהונאה במקח וממכר, it says, just like you're not allowed to cheat when it comes to business, כך הונאה בדברים. Also, one is not allowed to cheat with one's words. אם היה בעל תשובה, if somebody was a בעל תשובה, he repented, לא יאמר לו, one should not say to him, זכור מעשיך הראשונים. He says, hey, remember what you did yesterday. אם הוא בן גרים, if he was the son of converts, לא יאמר לו, he shouldn't say to him, זכור מעשה אבותיך. It says, hey, remember where your father came from. שנאמר, because there's a verse that says, וגר לא תונה ולא תלחצנו. It says you have to treat the converts in a righteous manner. So, let's try to understand what's going on over here. And especially, we have Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak that talked badly about Shaul. You remember what happened to him? So over here, the Gemara itself, after it learned the lesson from Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, it looks like what? And you didn't learn the lesson for King David? You just learned the lesson for King Shaul? How come you didn't say nothing against him? Okay. Page 9. ויש לומר רביעו בזה. So we have to say the explanation for this. So there's a rule that says, אף על פי שגר שנתגייר כקטן שנולד עמי, even though we have the concept that when a convert converts, he becomes a new person, he doesn't have a history anymore, there's no history, he's just a new person.
He said that David got התגייר?
No, he said he came from root. That's what you tell him. Yeah. But that's his lineage. That's where he comes from. This is קופת שרצים. This is skeletons in the closet. מכל מקום, לידתו היא באופן שנשאר רושם ממעמדו ומצבו הקודם. It says, nevertheless, the fact that he came from root has an impression on him. It says, we have to say, it puts an impression on him. כדברי הגמרא, it says, just like the Gemara says, שסורו רע. It says, the reason why you have to treat converts kindly, it says, for a specific reason. You know, if you're not going to treat them kindly, what's going to happen? They're going to return to idol worship. It says they came from the idol worship. It's easier for them to go back to what they came from. It says you can't mistreat him. You say one time a bad thing about a convert, what's going to happen? He's going to go back to his sin. He's going to get offended. He's going to... Naturally, he comes from bad stock, like it says. It's easy for him to go off the way. Surora, that's what it says. He goes off the way quickly. ולכן צריכה להיות אצלו זהירות גדולה יותר. That's why you have to be very careful with converts. They can come to Judaism quickly and they can go away quickly. כמו בעל תשובה. It says this is just like a בעל תשובה. Somebody who did תשובה. That what? שצריכים a בעל תשובה, we're going to see something fascinating. A בעל תשובה, when it comes to things which are prohibited, he needs to hate them. A tzaddik doesn't need to. A Baal Tshuva needs to hate the things he used to do. We'll explain. שצריכים להיות כל מיני רע ואיסורים מאוסים אצלו. That all the evil behavior has to be disgusted by the Baal Tshuva. ושיאמר אי אפשי. That is going to say, this is disgusting. This is pig, I used to eat pig. This is disgusting. This is not possible. This is the most disgusting thing in the world. I can't even contemplate eating it. That should be his perspective. And what does the halacha says? You know, in Shulchan Aruch it says, לא כמו tzaddik. It says, not a righteous person. Why should a righteous says, why should not eat meat and milk, for example? Not because it's disgusting. Because God told me not to. Actually, it might taste nice. But God told me not to. ולא כמו צדיק שעליו אמור רז"ל, a righteous person should say on meat and milk eating together, לא יאמר אדם אי-אפשי. A person shouldn't say, it's disgusting. A בעל תשובה has to say it's disgusting. A tzaddik doesn't say it's disgusting. אלא אפשי, it says, no, it sounds actually nice. No, meat and milk actually sounds nice, a tzaddik should say. But, ומה אעשה שאבי בשמיים גזר עליי? But what can I do? God in heaven told me not to. So therefore I'm not going to eat it. בכדי שלא ייפול חס ושלום. Okay. So let's try to make an understanding of what's going on over here. Source number 7. רבי אליעזר הגדול אומר, רבי אליעזר the great says, מפני מה הזהיר התורה ב-36 מקומות בגר שלא יצייר אותו? Why are there 36 times in the Torah that tells us about a convert not to cause him pain? מפני שסורו רע. Because he may easily go back to his old way. שעלול הדבר להחזירו על דרך רעה. Because you're not going to treat him nicely, he's going to go back easily to his wrong ways. Okay? Rashi in Kedoshim explain, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah אומר, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, לא יאמר אדם נפשי קצה בי בשר חזיר. It says a person shouldn't say, I hate pig. This is the most disgusting thing. אי אפשי ללבוש כליים. A person shouldn't say, you know what, wear linen and wool together? It's the most disgusting thing in the world. Well, he shouldn't say that. אבל יאמר, but what should he say? אפשי. You should say, you know what, it's not disgusting. It is possible. I don't see anything, maybe I don't even see anything wrong with it, one should say. But God decided that pig is not kosher and cow is kosher. If God would have told me pig is kosher and cow is not kosher, I would have eaten the pig and the cow. So the cow is not disgusting, lion is not disgusting. Kosher and not kosher is something that God decided, got nothing to do with me. Yeah? So this is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Let's continue on source number 9. וכמו על דרך משל, but what happens if you're a בעל תשובה? If you're not a tzaddik? משל האדם שחטא ואשם וחזר בתשובה. But a person who went the wrong way and he sinned and now he did תשובה and now returned to God, צריך שמירה מעולה שלא יחזור לסורו. He needs a great guardian not to go to his previous state. If he's going to go around and say, you know what, pig, it's not so bad, it actually tastes nice. It's only because God decided that pig I'm not allowed to eat. That's why I'm not eating it.
Because he tasted it already.
Yeah.
No? I mean...
But it's not the point that he tasted it. The point that he sinned. Because he sinned already, yeah, because he already experienced sin, if he's just going to accept it as the tzaddik, God decided, it's not going to affect him deeply. See, a tzaddik, you don't need to affect him deeply not to eat the pig. But the Baal Tshuva, if he's not really affected by the fact that what he ate, it doesn't really bother him, it's not disgusting to him now, he might go back and eat it. I'm not afraid that a tzaddik that never ate pig is going to go back and eat it. Even though he says it might taste good. I'm not. But him, if he's not going to be disgusted, I'm afraid that one day he needs a greater guardianship than the tzaddik. Just like the convert, you need to treat in a different manner than a regular Jew. מה שאין כן מי שלא טעם טעם חטא, but somebody who never sinned, אין צריכה לשמירה כל כך. He can say to himself, you know why I don't eat it? It might taste good, but God told me not to eat it. וכידוע שזהו עניין תשובת הגדר. And like it is known, this is the boundaries that one has to set. כי יש תשובת המשקל, there is a תשובה that's called on weight, and what does it mean? וכפי ההנאה שנהנה בעבירה. So this is the way it is supposed to be. It says, how do you know if you're a Baal Tshuva? It says, it's simple. It's simple to know if a person is a Baal Tshuva or not a Baal Tshuva. How much enjoyment did a person get in the sin? How much joy did he have while he was sinning? Let's take an example. When he was sinning. Oh. At the time he was sinning, how much joy did he have? How much energy of joy was there? The energy of joy in the sin itself. כן לפי ערך זה יש לו להצטער. It says, you know when you did tshuva? If it disgusts you and pains you as much on the fact that you did. If it doesn't disgust you and pains you as much, it means what? You didn't do tshuva. If there's no disgust at the amount of joy that you had, you didn't do tshuva. So in other words, you cannot like the sin. See, the tzaddik doesn't mind the piece of steak over there. He never enjoyed it, so he doesn't need to keep it away. A person who did enjoy it now needs to have at least disgust at the amount that he had joy from eating it. לפי ערך זה יש לו להצטער בדאגת הלב, כנגד החשק והתאווה אשר נהנה. This corresponding to the joy that he had when he enjoyed it. אך תשובת הגדר היא להתרחק ביותר עד קצה האחרון מהרע. But over here you need to stay completely away from the sin, כדי שלא יתאווה לעבירה חס ושלום. So like you're not even going to come to sin, God forbid. ועל בעל תשובה צריך לזה יותר ממי שלא חטא. The בעל תשובה needs it much more than somebody who didn't sin. Because somebody who didn't sin didn't have joy, he doesn't need to stay away from it because there's no joy. Somebody who had joy from it, if he still has joy, he say, oh, this is still good, we're going to be afraid that he might taste it.
If you never taste chocolate, you don't know what sweet is, you have no desire for it in a way. You know, it's like you never tasted it.
Yeah, it might not be tasty, by the way. Not all sins are tasty.
Right. This is a tasty sin, but there is...
No. I'm saying even if the person, when he did sin, it was immediately bad taste to him. The sin itself tastes bad. Don't think it's because of the taste. It's because of the sin. It's not the taste that makes it.
If he sinned and he didn't enjoy it, he didn't have on it...
Or it's going to be easier for him.
Go return to this sin...
He will not need as much... He will not need as much disgust as somebody who enjoyed it. It's correlating to the amount of joy that one had. For example, if a guy robbed the bank and immediately they caught him and they put him in jail immediately afterwards, right? When you take him out of jail, you're not afraid he's going to rob a bank again. Why? Because you remember what happened last time he robbed the bank. 2 minutes later, he was in jail for the next 10 years. But the guy who robbed the bank and then for 50 years he was enjoying the money, he might have in his mind, you know what, maybe it's good to rob a bank. So he needs to be really disgusted by the fact of robbing a bank. That's the difference. וכן אמר הרב הקדוש המגיד נשמתו עדן, and this is what שאף על פי שמור רז"ל, the Magid, the student of the Baal Shem Tov said, אל יאמר אדם אי אפשי בבשר אלא אפשי. It says, the Torah tells us, do not say that pig is disgusting, but you say, no, it might actually taste good. ובת מה אעשה? ואבי שבשמיים גזר עליי. But what should I do? God in heaven decreed upon me not to eat it. היינו, who is this replies to? במי שלא חטא מעולם, somebody who never sinned. אבל הבעל תשובה, בבעל תשובה צריכים להיות כל מיני רע ואיסורים מאוסים אצלו. The amount of joy that he had from the sin has to be discussed now to the sin itself. ושיאמר אי אפשי בכדי שלא ייפול חס ושלום, because he might actually fall into it, God forbid. נמצא מבואר, so here we found, שמי שהיה כבר למטה במדרגה, that somebody that ever failed, anybody who sinned before, צריך שמירה יתרה, אף גם לאחר שנתעלה. He needs extra protection, even after he raises up. ועל פי זה מובן. So now we're going to go back to our start. page 11. מה בנוגע לדוד אומרים לו חזור לאחוריך? It says, what do we mean when we say to King David, look behind you, look where you're coming from? לפי שיש בו דפי, because you have some blemish, שבא מרות המואביה, the blemish came from root. שאין זה בבחינת זכור מעשיך הראשונים. We're not telling him, hey, we know where you come from, we know your low life. That's not what we're saying to him. It's something completely different. אלא עניין שנוגע לעבודתו בפועל. We say to King David, we realize how you have to serve God. You have to serve God, you know, like whom? Like us. King David knows what it means to serve God. What does it mean? שצריך להתנהג כמו בעל תשובה. That he needs to behave like a בעל תשובה. שזקוק לזהירות יתרה. That he needs to really be careful. And here comes the difference between King Saul and King David. You know what's the difference? King Saul doesn't understand the person who sins. He has no clue what's happening there. He cannot relate to it. He has no idea. He doesn't hate sin. King David hates sin. You know why he hates sin? Because he sinned. Because he tasted it. So King David can relate to whom? To the nation. King Saul is not able to relate to the nation. This is why God didn't choose King Saul, but he chose King David, as we're going to see soon. מה שאין כן שאול שהוא מדרגת צדיק, it is not King Saul that was on the level of a tzaddik, ואינו זקוק לזהירות יתרה. He doesn't need so much protection. ועניין זה הוא תנאי בעניין המלכות. And now, if you want to deal with a congregation, a person needs to deal with people, he has to understand sin. He cannot be someone who doesn't understand sin, who doesn't hate sin. It is impossible. שאין מעמידים, now you're going to understand why God didn't like King Saul as a king. He was too righteous. That was the problem. He never related to people. He didn't know how to behave with sin. He didn't hate sin. שאין מעמידים פרנס על הציבור, that anybody that comes in contact with the congregation, אלא אם כן קופה של שרצים תלויה לו מאחוריו. He has to taste the taste of sin. He has to know what sin is all about. ולכן לא נמשכה מלכות בית שאול. And this is why King Saul wasn't chosen to be a king. מפני שלא היה בו שום דופי, because he never tasted the taste of sin. He couldn't relate to the people. אף על פי ששאול מצד עצמו היה בדרגה נעלית, even though King Saul in his level was very high, ועד שיש דעה שדווקא שאול הוא ראשון למלכים ולא דוד, that there's an opinion that says that King Saul is the first of the kings, מכל מקום לא נמשכה בית שאול. Nevertheless, God did not choose him. וכמאמר רז"ל, שאול ויהוא שנשכו בפח, לא נמשכה מלכותן. It says, even though they were anointed, they did not become kings. כי המלך צריך להיות כמו פרנס על הציבור, because the king has to relate to the congregation. לסבול טרחם ומסעם. He needs to understand where they're coming from. כפי שהתנהג משה, בני ישראל שהיו טרחנים, just like Moses did with the Jewish people. Yeah? He felt their pain, he felt their sin. ולכן יש צורך שתהיה לו שייכות עם מעמדו ומצבו של הציבור. In other words, he needs to be in some manner on their level. שאז יכול להיות פנס עליהם. Only then he can be authority over them. מה שאין כן בהיותו למעלה מהם. But it is not so when he's actually higher the congregation. Let's test a story about this. כידוע הסיפור אודות אדמו"ר האמצעי, there's a famous story about the Mittler Rebbe, שאחד שאל אותו ביחידות בנוגע לעניין מסוים שלא היה שייך אצלו כלל. A person came to the Mittler Rebbe and he asked him about a specific matter that he did. Now it was known that the Rebbe, when the Rebbe used to give advice of how to correct one sin, the Rebbe had to relate to it. He had to find it in himself in some level, on some level. And this person asked the Mittler Rebbe, he asked the Mittler Rebbe such a sin that the Mittler Rebbe couldn't find himself the sin. So actually what was it? A large group of people came to the Mittler Rebbe and he invited them one by one. They were supposed to go, all of them, in front of the Mittler Rebbe. And the fourth and fifth guy was this particular guy. And as he goes into the Rebbe listens to the sin, and then he sends him out. And everybody sees that the Mittler Rebbe doesn't take any more, no one else. So all the Hasidim are waiting. And they were waiting for a day, 24 hours. And what was the Mittler Rebbe doing this 24 hours? He's sitting in his room, he's saying Tehillim, he's davening and he's crying for 24 hours. After 24 hours, he calls that guy over and he gives him something to do. He says, if you do this and this, it's going to be, this is a way for you to take care of the sin. And then he continues to work with the other one. So the question is, what's going on over here? So it says, because the Mittler Rebbe, it's not that there was no answer to the person in the beginning. The Mittler Rebbe was in such a righteous status that he wasn't able to be a Rebbe at the time. A Rebbe needs to feel the pain of the Chassid. If he cannot relate to the Chassid in any level, he cannot be a Rebbe. He cannot be Parnas. He cannot be a king. He cannot be a governor. So the Rebbe says, everybody's coming to me as a Rebbe. I'm not a Rebbe anymore. And the proof is I'm not a Rebbe because I can't see it in me. Yeah? In other words, I'm not King David, I'm King Saul. And this is not what it's meant to be. Yeah, I have to see this sin in me on some minute level at least. Obviously not the same level, but there's some. ולא היה יכול להשיב לו. He couldn't answer him. עד שמצא בעצמו עניין זה בדקות שבדקות. Until he found it in himself, even in slight thing. כי כל זמן שאינו מוצא בעצמו עניין זה, because as long as he doesn't find it in himself, this matter, אז אינו יכול להיות פרנס עליו. Then he cannot actually help him. He cannot be an authority over him. וזהו הטעם שאין מעמידים פרנס על הציבור, אלא אם כן קופה של שרצים תלויה לו חולו. And this is why nobody can put into power unless he has a touch in evil. He has to understand evil. He has to know what evil is. Somebody who has no idea what evil is cannot give advice to anybody. כי בלאו הכי אין לו שייכות עם הציבור כולו. Because without this you cannot have any relationship with the congregation. page 13. על פי זה יש לבאר את תוכן ההפטרה של מחת חודש ושייכותה לערב ראש חודש. So now we're going to understand why we read this הפטרה on this Shabbos. עניינו של ערב ראש חודש הוא, what happens in ערב ראש חודש? שאז הלבנה היא בתכלית הקטנות והאלם. The night before ראש חודש is the moon at the, you can't even see it, it's not there. It's gone. עד שלא נשאר אפילו נקודה. Even a point is not there. ועל זה נאמר מחר חודש. And on that you say, don't worry. Tomorrow, you're going to restart again. There's going to be a point. We're going to start. שדווקא על ידי תכלית האלם. It means you want to connect to the Jewish people, you want to connect to the new month. The only way to connect to the new, you cannot be all the time like the sun. The sun is all the time the same. It cannot be all the same and you can affect the Jewish people. It has to be like the moon. It has to disappear completely. In other words, to be within in order to affect the life of a Jew. תכלית האלם יהיה לאחר זה הגילוי באופן שהתחשבות בחולו. וכן הוא בנוגע למעמדם ומצבם של בני ישראל. So it is with the condition of the Jewish people. שנמשלו ללבנה. It says, our life is just like the life of the moon. ועתידים להתחדש כמותה. And we will eventually be renewed just like the moon. ערב ראש חודש מורה על מעמד ומצב של העלם והסתר את בני ישראל. The night before Rosh Chodesh shows us the Jewish people sinning. There's no light by them. That's what it represents. It represents a time where the Jewish people are as sinners. That's what it represents. There's no light shining by them. They don't have the godly light in them. החל מצד כללות יראת הנשמה למטה. First of all, because our neshama came, that was holy, sitting with God up there, came down to this world, and now in this world it is affected by the physical world. להתלבש בגוף גשמי, ובלשון שמביא כבוד קדושת מורי וחמי אדמו"ר. What are we? We are שק של בשר ועצמות. We are a sack of flesh and bones, עם דם רותח, with evil inclination, that all the time wants to take us away from doing God's work. ובמיוחד מצרך הירידה שבזמן הגלות, and specifically at this time that we're in exile, ובפרט בסוף זמן הגלות, specifically at our time, that is even worst of the worst time. Nobody knows what's going on this time. There were times that at least people, they had at least a brain to think. Today we live in an area where nobody can even think. קודם ביאת משיח, the time of before Mashiach is coming, ומצד גודם האלם וההסתר יכולים לבוא לידי חס ושלום די ייאוש. So a person can say to himself, you know what, look at the Jewish, it just becomes worse and worse and worse and worse. In other words, at the point you cannot see the light of God, that's when you know what's going to be tomorrow? Tomorrow is you are going to be. Tomorrow is going to be Rosh Chodesh. Tomorrow, the light of the moon is going to shine. But for that you need tshuva. We need repentance. ועל זה נאמר, and this is what it says, ויאמר לו יונתן לדוד, and this is what Jonathan says to David, מחר חודש ונפקדת כי יפקד מושבך. It says, tomorrow is the new moon and you will be remembered. Why will you be remembered tomorrow? Because your seat will be empty. The reason why God chose you as the new moon is telling King David, you know why? Because כי King Saul's seat was never empty. He was always there. You have a taste of what it is to be a human being. Yonatan. And imagine who's saying this. This is King Saul talking. Yehonatan is the continuation of King Saul. Yonatan is telling King David, you know, you want me to sit on the throne? It says, I cannot sit on the throne. You know why I cannot sit on the throne? Because I'm like the sun. I'm always there. I don't relate to the people. I don't understand sin. Yonatan, bno v'yorshor של שאול. This is Yonatan, the continuation of King Saul. שעניינו עבודת הצדיקים. What was Yonatan? Yonatan was a completely righteous person. He never tasted sin. He didn't know what sin is. אומר לדוד, he says to David, when God puts a king over the Jewish people, he's not going to put the sun in the sky. He's going to put a moon king, somebody that has a taste in sin. אומר לדוד, שעניינו הוא עבודת בעלי תשובה. It says, because you, King David, know what tshuva is. You tasted tshuva. It says, I never tasted tshuva. Poor me. He's crying. He says, I don't know what tshuva is. I'm never going to experience it. שדווקא על ידי העלם והסתר, just because a person was far away from God, he has something, an advantage on Yonatan. What's the advantage that King David has on Yonatan? Yonatan doesn't hate sin. That's the advantage. King David hates sin. Why? Because he experienced it. And he knows how evil it is. It knows that it removed him from God. So he hates it. Yonatan doesn't hate it. For him it's intellectual. He was never attracted to it. He's not attracted to it now. So it's only intellectual. If God would have said this, I would have done this. If God would have said that, I would have done that. Yeah, I would have listened to God, whatever. He's not emotionally involved in the matter. For King David, the sin itself, it's the thing that took him away from God. He can't tolerate it. It says that's what God wants. כי יפקוד מושבך, יהיה הגילוי היותר נעלה. In other words, you're going to get a revelation higher than if I would be sitting there. ונפקדת, and then you will be counted. שזהו עילוי שנעשה על ידי העבודה של בירור נפש הבהמית. It says, you actually elevate the animal soul. Something that I never did. Yonatan says. He never did? Because he never had it. But King David actually says, you have the job of what a Jew is supposed to do down here in this world, to elevate the animal soul. וכללות עבודת הבירורים בזמן הגלות, and this is the job of a Jew at the time of exile, שכללותה הוא עניין עבודת התשובה, that specifically it is תשובה, שדווקא על ידי זה באים לעילוי היותר גדול שיהיה בגאולה עתידה, that just through this we're going to get to the revelation that's going to be, ונגלה כבוד השם וראו כל בשר, that all the flesh are going to see, היינו שהבשר הגשמי יזדחך כל כך עד שיהיה אלוקות, until the physical flesh is going to be so refined until it in itself will see godliness. וכאמור שגם הגאולה העתידה תבוא על ידי עבודת התשובה דווקא, and the redemption is going to come through us repenting, doing תשובה, וזהו עניין של קריאת ההפטרה. And now we understand, this is what Haftarah does. The whole Haftarah, not just this Haftarah, every Haftarah, שמהווה נתינת כוח, it giving us the power, כמו נתינת הכוח שבקריאת התורה, just like the power when we read the Torah every week, so we're with God throughout the week, שזהו הטעם שחתן עולה לתורה, this is the reason when you really married, a man has to go up to the Torah, כדי לקבל נתינת כוח, so that he can receive extra strength, על כללות העבודת בהלם והסתר של זמן הגלות. Since now we are the day before Chodesh, we don't feel the light of God, we don't see the light of God in the world. The opposite, it's completely darkness in the world. We don't have the light of God at all. שעל ידי זה באים לתכלית הגילוי שתהיה בגאולה עתידה. But because of that, because we tasted the sin, because we tasted not seeing the light of God, we are not like King Saul. We can work on ourselves to not like the physical world. שאז יהיה דוד עבדי נשיא לנו עולם. Then it's going to be King David is going to be the king forever.